I still remember the day I thought everything important in my life was already behind me. I was sitting in a quiet room, looking out the window, watching people rush through their busy lives, and I wondered if my time for change, excitement, and new beginnings had already passed. Maybe you've felt that way too. Maybe you've looked at your age, your past, your experiences, and quietly asked yourself, is it too late for me to start again? Let me tell you something very important today. It is never too late to start again, not at 60, not at 70, not even at 80. Life does not suddenly close its doors just because the calendar pages have turned. In fact, sometimes the most meaningful chapters of our lives begin after the world assumes our story is already finished. When we are younger, we spend decades chasing responsibilities. We raise families, we build careers, we pay bills, we solve problems. We wake up early, work hard, and carry the weight of expectations. Years pass quickly, and before we know it, we arrive at a moment where everything becomes quiet. The job might end, the children grow up, the routine changes, and suddenly, there is space in life that didn't exist before. For some people, that quiet feels uncomfortable. They feel lost. They feel like the purpose that once drove them every day has disappeared. But what if that quiet is not the end of the story? What if it's actually the beginning of a brand new chapter? Think about it for a moment. When you were younger, you often had dreams you couldn't pursue because life demanded your attention elsewhere. Maybe you wanted to write a book. Maybe you wanted to travel. Maybe you wanted to learn music, paint landscapes, start a small business, or mentor others with the wisdom you've gained. Those dreams didn't disappear just because time passed. They simply waited. And here's the truth that many people forget. Experience is power. The years you've lived are not a limitation. They are your greatest advantage. You've seen life from many angles. You've survived challenges. You've learned lessons that younger people are still struggling to understand. You know what matters and what doesn't. That wisdom is something no classroom can teach. Starting again later in life doesn't mean pretending to be young again. It means using everything you've learned to create a life that feels meaningful now. It means choosing growth instead of comfort. It means refusing to believe the quiet voice that says, "Your time has passed." I once spoke to a man who was 72 years old when he decided to take his first art class. For most of his life, he had worked in construction. He had built houses, fixed roofs, and worked with his hands every day. But deep inside, he always loved painting. When he finally picked up a brush in that classroom, he felt nervous, almost embarrassed. Most of the students were decades younger than him. But he stayed. He practiced. Week after week he returned, slowly learning how to mix colors, how to capture light, how to turn a blank canvas into something beautiful. A few years later, that same man held a small gallery show where people admired his paintings. Some even bought them. But the most powerful moment wasn't the sales or the applause. It was the look on his face when he said, "I finally did something I always dreamed about." That story reminds us of something simple but powerful. The moment you decide to try again, life begins to move again. Too often, society sends a quiet message to older adults that their role is simply to step aside, to slow down, to settle. But life was never meant to be lived that way. Growth does not have an expiration date. Curiosity does not disappear with age. And purpose does not belong only to the young. There is something extraordinary about a person who chooses to grow after 60. It shows courage, it shows humility, and it shows a deep belief that life still has more to offer. Maybe starting again doesn't mean something dramatic. Maybe it's as simple as learning a new skill, joining a community group, taking long walks with the intention of improving your health, writing down your life stories so future generations understand where they came from. Small steps can create powerful changes. The most important thing is the decision to move forward. Sometimes fear is the biggest obstacle. Fear whispers questions like, what if I fail? What if people judge me? What if I'm too old to learn something new? Those fears are natural, but they are also misleading. Every person who has ever done something meaningful has faced the same doubts. The difference is that they chose action instead of hesitation. Imagine standing at the edge of a new path. Behind you are decades of memories, experiences, victories, and mistakes. Ahead of you is a future that is still unwritten. That future may be shorter than the years already lived, but it can still be filled with discovery, connection, and purpose. The beauty of starting again later in life is that you no longer need to prove anything to the world. When we are young, we often chase approval. We worry about how others see us. We compare ourselves constantly. But with age comes a gift many people overlook: freedom. Freedom to choose what truly matters. Freedom to spend your time on things that bring genuine joy. Freedom to say yes to new adventures and no to things that drain your energy. That freedom can transform the way you see your future. I remember another conversation with a retired teacher who told me something I will never forget. She said, "When I retired, I thought my purpose had ended. Teaching had been my whole life. But then I realized something. I didn't stop being someone who helps others learn. I just changed where and how I do it." She began volunteering at a local community center, helping adults learn to read and write. Week after week, she sat with people who had struggled their entire lives with literacy. Slowly, patiently, she helped them build confidence. Years later, she told me that those moments were some of the most meaningful of her life. Her career had ended, but her purpose had simply evolved. That's the key idea many people miss. Reinventing your future doesn't mean abandoning who you are. It means expanding who you can become. You carry decades of stories inside you. Moments of strength, moments of resilience, moments where you stood back up even when life knocked you down. Those stories are powerful, not just for you, but for others who need encouragement. The world needs more people who understand patience, perseverance, and perspective. Those qualities are not developed overnight. They are earned through years of living. So, if you ever find yourself thinking that your best days are behind you, pause for a moment and challenge that belief. Ask yourself a different question instead. What if my most meaningful chapter is still ahead? That question alone can change everything. Because the truth is, starting again doesn't require perfect conditions. It doesn't require youth, endless energy, or a flawless plan. It simply requires a willingness to take one step forward, one new idea, one new habit, one new opportunity to grow. And when you take that step, something remarkable happens. The world begins to respond. You meet new people. You discover interests you never expected. You find parts of yourself that were waiting quietly for the chance to come alive. Life begins to feel vibrant again. So today, if you are listening to this and wondering whether it's too late to reinvent your future, remember this simple truth. Your story is not finished. As long as you are breathing, learning, and dreaming, there is still another page waiting to be written. And sometimes, the chapters written later in life are the ones filled with the deepest wisdom, the strongest purpose, and the greatest sense of fulfillment. Starting again is not a sign that something went wrong in your past. It's a sign that you still believe in your future. And that belief, even at this stage of life, can open doors you never imagined were still waiting for you. One of the biggest myths people believe about getting older is that change becomes impossible. Society often tells us that habits are fixed, abilities decline, and new dreams belong only to the young. But if you look closely at real life, you will see that this belief simply isn't true. Human beings are designed to adapt. We learn, grow, and evolve throughout our entire lives. The mind does not suddenly shut down at a certain age. In fact, many scientists and psychologists have discovered that the brain continues forming new connections even in later years. That means learning new skills, developing new habits, and discovering new passions is always possible. The real barrier isn't age. The real barrier is belief. If someone spends years telling themselves, "I'm too old for this," eventually they stop trying, they stop exploring, they stop opening new doors. But the moment that belief changes, everything begins to shift. Think about how many times in your life you have already adapted to change. When you were young, you probably faced challenges that felt overwhelming at the time. Maybe it was starting your first job, raising children, moving to a new place, or dealing with unexpected hardships. At each stage, you learned how to adjust. You found solutions. You moved forward. That same ability still exists within you today. Starting again later in life is not about ignoring the past. It's about using everything the past has taught you. Every mistake you made, every problem you solved, every difficult moment you survived has shaped your understanding of the world. That understanding is incredibly valuable. Many younger people are still searching for clarity. They are trying to figure out who they are, what matters to them, and what direction their lives should take. You, on the other hand, already carry decades of insight. You know that time is precious. You know that relationships matter more than possessions. You know that worrying about small things rarely leads to happiness. These lessons are powerful tools for building a meaningful future. Sometimes the idea of reinvention sounds intimidating because people imagine it requires a huge transformation. They picture quitting everything they know and starting an entirely new life overnight. But reinvention doesn't have to look like that. Often, it begins with something very small. It might start with curiosity, a simple question like, "What else could I learn?" or "What have I always wanted to try?" That question alone can open the door to new experiences. Maybe you decide to learn photography and begin capturing moments in nature. Maybe you join a local club and meet people who share similar interests. Maybe you begin writing your memories so that your children and grandchildren will understand the journey that shaped your life. These actions might seem small at first, but they have a powerful effect on the human spirit. They bring energy back into everyday life. They remind you that growth is still happening. I once met a man who spent most of his career working long hours as a mechanic. He was skilled with machines, but he always felt that he had missed out on exploring the world beyond his hometown. After retiring, he made a simple decision. Every month, he would visit a place he had never seen before. Sometimes it was just a nearby town. Other times it was a national park or a historical landmark. He didn't spend a lot of money. He simply packed a small bag, got in his car, and went somewhere new. Over time, those small trips changed the way he saw life. He met people from different backgrounds. He learned about cultures and stories he had never encountered before. Most importantly, he felt alive again. One day, he said something that stayed with me. He said, "I thought retirement meant slowing down, but for me, it became the moment I finally started exploring." That statement reveals something powerful. Reinventing your future is not about age. It is about attitude. When you approach life with curiosity instead of fear, the possibilities begin to expand. Every day becomes an opportunity to learn something new or experience something different. Another challenge many seniors face when thinking about starting again is the fear of failure. After living many years, people sometimes feel embarrassed about trying something new because they worry about making mistakes. But mistakes are not signs of weakness. They are part of learning. In fact, the willingness to make mistakes is often the key to discovering new strengths. Imagine a child learning to walk. They fall down again and again, but they don't stop trying because falling is simply part of the process. Eventually, they stand, take a step, and then another. Before long, walking becomes natural. Learning new things later in life works the same way. At first, it might feel awkward. You might struggle with unfamiliar skills, but with patience and persistence, improvement begins to happen. And there is something beautiful about that process. Every new skill you develop becomes a reminder that growth never truly stops. There is also another benefit to starting again later in life that people rarely talk about. You now have the ability to choose your path more freely than before. Many responsibilities that once demanded your attention may no longer control your schedule. This freedom creates space for creativity, exploration, and personal fulfillment. You might decide to share your knowledge with others. Mentorship can be one of the most meaningful ways to reinvent your purpose. Younger generations are often eager to learn from those who have lived through challenges and gained wisdom from experience. Your stories, your advice, and your encouragement could have a powerful impact on someone else's life. Think about the mentors who influenced you when you were younger. Maybe it was a teacher who believed in you, a family member who offered guidance, or a colleague who showed you how to overcome obstacles. Their words probably stayed with you for years. Now you have the opportunity to become that source of guidance for someone else. Another path many people discover later in life is creativity. Art, music, writing, gardening, cooking, and countless other activities allow people to express themselves in ways they may never have explored before. Creativity has a unique ability to bring joy and peace into daily life. It gives the mind something positive to focus on, and often leads to a sense of accomplishment that feels deeply satisfying. I remember meeting a woman who began writing short stories at the age of 68. At first, she wrote simply for fun. She would sit in a quiet corner of her house with a notebook and let her imagination wander. Over time, she shared some of her stories with friends and family. They loved them. Eventually, she published a small collection of those stories online. What began as a simple hobby turned into something that touched the hearts of readers around the world. But the most meaningful part of her journey wasn't the recognition. It was the joy she felt each time she finished writing a new story. She said it made her feel like a child discovering something magical again. Moments like that remind us that the human spirit never stops seeking meaning. Even in our later years, we still want to grow. We still want to contribute. We still want to feel that our lives matter. And the truth is, they absolutely do. Every new step you take sends a powerful message to yourself and to others. It says that life is still worth exploring. It says that dreams are not limited by age. It says that the future can still hold exciting possibilities. So if you are standing at a crossroads right now, wondering whether you have the courage to start again, remember this. You have already overcome more challenges than you probably realize. You have navigated decades of life with resilience and determination. That strength has not disappeared. It is still there, waiting for you to use it again. The next chapter of your life does not need to look like anyone else's story. It can be uniquely yours. It can be filled with new experiences, meaningful connections, and the quiet satisfaction that comes from continuing to grow. And the moment you choose to move forward with curiosity and hope, reinvention is no longer just an idea. It becomes a reality that begins one step at a time. There comes a moment in many people's lives when they begin to reflect more deeply on the years behind them. Memories surface more often. Old photographs suddenly carry more meaning. Certain songs, places, and conversations remind you of the journey you've taken. And sometimes, during those moments of reflection, a quiet question appears in your mind. What have I done with my life? And what can I still do with the time I have left? That question is not something to fear. In fact, it can be one of the most powerful questions a person ever asks themselves, because hidden inside that question is the opportunity to rediscover purpose. Purpose is something many people associate with careers or responsibilities. When we are younger, our purpose often revolves around providing for our families, building stability, and meeting the demands of everyday life. Those responsibilities shape our identity for decades. But when those responsibilities begin to shift or fade, many people feel uncertain. They wonder where their sense of direction has gone. The truth is that purpose never truly disappears. It simply evolves. Later in life, purpose often becomes less about obligation and more about meaning. Instead of doing things because you have to, you begin to do things because they truly matter to you. And that shift can be incredibly powerful. Imagine waking up in the morning knowing that the day ahead belongs to you, not to deadlines, not to pressures, but to choices that reflect what you value most. That kind of freedom allows you to design a life that feels more intentional and more fulfilling. Some people discover purpose by giving back to their communities. Volunteering, mentoring, or helping neighbors might seem like simple acts, but they can create profound connections. A few hours of kindness can brighten someone's entire week. And something remarkable often happens when you help others. You begin to feel needed again. You feel connected. You realize that your presence still makes a difference in the world. Many seniors find that their life experience becomes incredibly valuable in these moments. When someone younger is struggling with a difficult decision, your perspective can guide them. When someone feels discouraged, your stories of perseverance can give them hope. You may not always realize it, but the wisdom you carry is a gift that others are searching for. Another way people rediscover purpose later in life is through relationships. As time passes, we begin to understand that the most meaningful moments in life rarely involve achievements or possessions. Instead, they involve people. Conversations shared over a meal, laughter during family gatherings, quiet moments spent listening to someone you care about. These experiences create the memories that stay with us forever. Reinventing your future can sometimes mean strengthening those relationships and creating new ones. It might mean reconnecting with old friends, spending more time with family, or meeting new people who bring fresh perspectives into your life. Loneliness is something many older adults experience, but it doesn't have to define the future. Connection can be rebuilt at any stage of life. Joining community groups, attending local events, participating in hobbies, or even volunteering can introduce you to people who share your interests and values. Friendships formed later in life often become incredibly meaningful because they are built on genuine appreciation rather than obligation. There is also something deeply fulfilling about sharing your knowledge and skills with others. Perhaps you spent decades mastering a particular craft, profession, or talent, Those skills did not disappear when you stepped away from your career. They are still part of who you are. Teaching someone else what you know can be one of the most rewarding experiences imaginable. It allows you to see the impact of your journey in a new way. Every lesson you share becomes part of someone else's growth, and in many ways, that is one of the most lasting forms of legacy. Legacy is another idea that becomes more meaningful as we grow older. When we are young, we rarely think about how our actions will influence the future, but later in life, we begin to understand that our lives leave ripples that extend far beyond our own experiences. The way you treat others, the values you demonstrate, and the wisdom you share can shape the lives of people around you for generations. But legacy doesn't have to mean doing something famous or extraordinary. Often, it is built through small, consistent actions. A grandfather teaching his grandchild how to fish. A grandmother sharing family recipes and stories from the past. A neighbor offering guidance to someone facing a difficult moment. These quiet contributions may never make headlines, but they shape the hearts and minds of those who receive them. And sometimes, reinventing your future is about creating more of those meaningful moments. It's about deciding that the years ahead will be filled with intention rather than routine. Instead of simply passing time, you begin to invest time in experiences that bring joy, connection, and growth. For some people, that means exploring creativity. Painting, music, writing, woodworking, gardening. These activities allow the mind to stay active and engaged. They also provide a sense of accomplishment that keeps the spirit energized. For others, it means focusing on health and well-being, taking daily walks, practicing gentle exercise, or learning new ways to care for the body can improve both physical and mental strength. Every small step toward better health creates more opportunities to enjoy life. I once spoke with a man who decided to begin exercising regularly at the age of 70. At first, he could only walk short distances before feeling tired. But he remained consistent. Day after day, he walked a little farther. Months later, he was stronger, more energetic, and more confident than he had felt in years. But what surprised him the most was not the physical improvement, it was the mental shift that came with it. He told me, "I realized that if I can improve my health at this age, maybe there are other things I can still improve too." That realization sparked a series of changes in his life. He began learning new skills, meeting new people, and setting small goals that kept him motivated. All of it started with one simple decision to take action. That's often how reinvention begins. Not with a dramatic moment, but with a quiet choice to try something different. Sometimes people wait for motivation before taking action. They think they must feel inspired before making a change. But in reality, motivation often appears after action begins. When you take that first step, no matter how small, you send a message to your mind that growth is still happening. That feeling of progress creates energy. That energy leads to more action. And before you realize it, your life begins to feel dynamic again. There is also something deeply empowering about proving to yourself that age does not define your limits. Every time you learn something new, overcome a challenge, or accomplish a goal, you strengthen your confidence. You remind yourself that you are still capable of growth. And that confidence spreads into other areas of life. Suddenly, possibilities that once seemed out of reach begin to feel attainable again. The years ahead may not be identical to the years behind you, but they can still be meaningful, vibrant, and full of discovery. Life does not stop offering opportunities simply because we grow older. Sometimes those opportunities just look different. Instead of rushing through busy schedules, you may now have the chance to slow down and truly appreciate the moments that matter. Instead of chasing endless responsibilities, you can focus on experiences that bring genuine fulfillment. And when you embrace that mindset, something beautiful begins to happen. You stop measuring life by how many years have passed, and you start measuring it by how deeply you are living each day. That shift changes everything, because reinvention is not about turning back the clock, it's about moving forward with wisdom, courage, and curiosity. And when you do that, the future stops feeling like a fading road and begins to look like an open horizon filled with possibilities you may have never imagined before. As we reach this moment together, I want you to pause for just a second and think about your own life. Think about all the years you've lived, the challenges you've faced, the victories you've celebrated, and the lessons you've learned along the way. Every one of those experiences has shaped the person you are today. And that person still has something valuable to give. Too often, people believe that the most important part of life happens in the early years. They believe that once you pass a certain age, the most exciting opportunities are already gone. But that belief ignores one very powerful truth. Some of the most meaningful moments in life happen when we finally understand who we are. When we are young, we are often rushing. We are trying to build something, prove something, or achieve something. But as the years pass, we begin to see life differently. We begin to recognize what truly matters. We realize that time is not just something to spend, it is something to treasure. And when you understand that, every new day becomes more valuable than before. Starting again later in life does not mean erasing your past. Your past is not a mistake that needs to be corrected. It is the foundation that makes your future stronger. Every success and every failure has given you knowledge that others are still searching for. That knowledge allows you to approach the future with wisdom instead of confusion. You already know that life is not perfect. You know that obstacles will appear. But you also know something equally important. You know that obstacles can be overcome. You have already done it many times before. That strength is still within you today. There may be moments when doubt tries to return. You might hear a voice in your mind saying things like, "Maybe it's too late," or "Maybe I should just settle for the way things are." But remember this, that voice is not the truth. It is simply fear trying to keep you in a comfortable place. Growth has never come from comfort. Growth happens when we step forward, even when we are uncertain. It happens when we choose curiosity instead of hesitation. It happens when we allow ourselves to believe that life still has more to offer. And it does. There are still people you haven't met yet who will bring joy into your life. There are still experiences waiting that could inspire you in ways you never expected. There are still skills you can learn, places you can explore, and moments you can create that will become cherished memories. Your story is still unfolding. Every sunrise is another opportunity to shape the chapter that comes next. It may not need to be dramatic or complicated. Sometimes the most powerful changes come from simple decisions. A decision to try something new. A decision to reconnect with people who matter. A decision to take care of your health and your happiness. A decision to wake up each day with gratitude and purpose. Those choices may seem small, but over time they create a life filled with meaning. And here is something important to remember. The world still needs people like you. It needs people who have patience. It needs people who have lived long enough to understand kindness, resilience, and perspective. It needs people who can remind younger generations that life is not only about speed and achievement, but also about wisdom and compassion. You carry those qualities within you. When you share your stories, when you offer encouragement, when you show others how to face life with strength, you become a source of inspiration in ways you may never fully see. Your presence matters more than you realize. So instead of looking at your age as a limit, try seeing it as a badge of honor. Every year represents experiences that shaped your understanding of life. Every challenge you survived represents courage. You are not starting from the beginning again, you are starting from experience. And that makes your new beginning even more powerful. Imagine waking up tomorrow morning with a simple but meaningful thought, today is another chance to live fully. Not tomorrow, not next year, today. When you begin to live with that mindset, something changes inside you. Life feels more alive. Moments feel more precious. Even small joys like a conversation, a walk outside, or a creative project begin to feel significant again. You stop waiting for life to happen, and you start participating in it with intention. And that is the real meaning of reinvention. It is not about becoming someone completely different. It is about reconnecting with the parts of yourself that may have been waiting quietly for attention. Your curiosity, your courage, your dreams. Those parts of you are still there. They have been patient, waiting for the moment when you decide to bring them back into your life. And that moment can begin right now. Right here, right today. You have the ability to choose how the next chapter of your story will unfold. You can decide that the years ahead will not simply pass by unnoticed. Instead, they will be filled with growth, connection, and purpose. No matter how old you are, the future still belongs to you. So take a deep breath. Look ahead with hope instead of doubt. Trust that the experiences you've gained have prepared you for whatever comes next. Because the truth is simple, powerful, and worth remembering every single day. It is never too late to start again.